Hey, to all the managers and leaders out there, your role is like being a maestro, conducting a collection of different people, challenges, and triumphs. It's not always easy, we know that, to keep everyone in harmony, but when it works, it's pure symphony. So join us by the virtual water cooler as we share learnings and strike the right chord for success together.
Well, hello, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Dana. How are you? We're on episode 2 of season 3 already. Time just goes so fast.
I'm good because, listeners, it's been a while since Rose has had to count it down, right?
Yeah, right.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's just, it adds a certain perk to my day when Rose is counting it down.
Like I'm a real producer.
Yeah, like she's a real producer. Well, we've got a great episode today, the lovely art of receiving feedback. But before we dive into that, we're sort of being subversive, Rose. And instead of doing the traditional little warm up, which is like, tell us something nobody knows about you, I'm going to tell something about you that I bet nobody knows who's listening.
I'm scared.
No, you shouldn't. It's something I have so deeply admired about you. From the moment I learned this, Rose knows every word of that original hip hop tune, Rapper's Delight.
Yeah.
It is insane. And I was I heard that song the other day and it made me, you literally do know it. Not that you're going to sing all 15 minutes right now, but
what you hear is not a test. I'm a rapping to the beat.
Yeah. I'll know. Yeah.
Because I am the Wonder Mike and I like to say hello.
Yeah. It's something to behold. I think we figured that out, by the way, when we were camping in the wilderness of Arizona, sitting around a campfire.
I'm actually better with 5 minutes of funk, but I can hold my own with Rapper's Delight.
You know Rapper's Delight.
Yeah, I can hold my own, but 5 minutes of funk is my jam.
I don't know that one, so give me I probably know it, but don't know what it's called. But give me.
The party didn't start till I walked in, and I probably won't leave until the thing ends. But in the meantime, but in between time, if you work your thing, then I work mine. Yeah.
Wiki. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That was unexpected, yet so fun. Well, that one made me smile, but you know what's not making me smile?
What?
I love football, and it's over. I'm sad. I'm so sad.
This is always an emotional time for Rose. We have to kind of support her through this transition every year. I myself love football, but I don't quite enter the depression that Rose enters.
I just hate when it ends. I really hate when college football ends.
Yes.
But I also hate when NFL ends because I do a little tiny bit of gambling, not a lot, just like a little tiny bit, like a little bit.
A little bit.
When I say a little, I mean a very little bit, like tiny little bit.
Well, it's like my dad when he had never been to Vegas. And so I arranged for us to go to Vegas and he said, how much money should I bring to gamble with? And I said, whatever amount you are comfortable losing.
That's right. That's exactly right. So I will even put constraints around my gambling. Like I don't spend more than $30 all weekend.
Okay.
And usually not that much. That's like an extreme weekend. So
really? Okay.
Yeah. It's just like, going out to get a couple cheeseburgers these days at McDonald's.
Have you ever hit it big?
No, I did win. So it's a long story, but I know a lovely young man who works at a company called Underdog, and he got us introduced to their platform. So we do a little micro fantasy football gaming on the weekends, and it's super fun. So I've won I don't know, $125. I'm not. Yeah.
Well, guess who's buying me a drink the next time we're hanging out?
That's right.
Yeah.
But it's super fun, and it just gives you additional reason to pay attention, just to pay attention. And I love to watch, and I especially just love my man Saquon. I mean, for those of you who haven't listened before or don't pay attention, I am a giant Penn State football fan, and Saquon, he's an alum, and he's also just an amazing human being, and I love him as a football player. If you watched him during the season this year, he had a play where he was running the ball for the Eagles, and he hurdled someone backwards, like literally spun around in the air
I
and
love it.
hurdled him backwards. He's incredible. But the other reason I love him is he's a great human being. He's kind and humble. And there's this story that went kind of viral this summer about how when he was in college, he used to go to the bar because you're in college, a lot of kids go to the bar, and he'd sit in the back.
Not me.
Yeah,
Not me.
yeah, I don't
Nope.
believe that.
Absolutely not.
And he'd kind of sit in the back so not to draw too much attention to himself. And when people would start to notice him, they'd start shoveling him drinks. And the waitress that worked at this bar told a story this summer that was like he tried very intently to say thank you to every person that sent him a drink, and he always tipped her for every drink that was delivered to him because he didn't buy any, right? So
Oh.
it was just he was a incredibly kind, never arrogant person, and that has like translated into his professionalism because he had a shirt on this year that he got. It said 2K SA and Saquon and 2K for Saquon, and it said on the back he just acknowledged the people that help him. Like, how
But
about
I don't
those
even know what
boys?
that means, though.
He was going for 2,000 yards. Okay. So, and on the back, it just said, how about those boys up front, right? Acknowledging his linemen.
Oh, I
And he
love
had,
that.
he fought back from a really bad injury and just worked really hard to come where he was. And, he was getting ready to break like a single game record. And he pulled himself out of the game and said, let the other guys get some reps, let the young bucks get some reps. So I just think his humility and his kindness is something that is incredibly important when you're getting ready to either give or, in this discussion, receive feedback. You gotta be humble, sister. And by the way, fly, Eagles, fly. I just
Fly,
gotta
Eagles,
add that.
fly.
Yeah.
Well, also, though, I think also, and this is very germane to our current moment, that for better or worse, and we won't talk about our personal opinions on this, but we're seeing a lot of different styles of leadership in the world right now and in our own country right now. And there is one version of leadership that is not about humility and not about kindness. And I think it's important to recognize that that's not the only definition. And Saquon is a wonderful example of that. And there are many examples of leadership that can be firm and deliver results, yet still have humility and kindness. So, anyway,
Yeah, no, and he's just a fabulous representation of the humble, kind,
giving credit, clearly.
giving credit leadership that we want to spread on
Mhm.
our
Yes,
podcast.
on our podcast. That's what
That's
we're
right.
spreading. All right. So now, like you said, there's a link to our topic today of feedback.
Yes. And because you know what, Dana?
What?
Someone taught me a long time ago. Feedback is a gift.
Sure is. I just love it when I've gotten feedback.
Right? Yeah. And there's really kind of two perspectives for feedback, right?
Mhm.
There's when you're an employee and you actually are asking or receiving the feedback, or when you're a manager and you're giving it.
Yep. Sometimes as a manager, you're receiving feedback from your employees. You know what I mean? So it's like both are receiving and asking.
Just a heads up on that. Like, people may think, well, the CEO doesn't get feedback. Yeah, he
Oh,
does.
yeah, he does. Yeah, he does. From the board. Oh, yeah. Don't ever think the CEO isn't getting some intense feedback.
So you're always in normal circumstances, and as Dana alluded to earlier, we see some abnormal ones right now, but in normal circumstances, you will be receiving feedback. So that's what we're going to focus on today, right, Dana?
Right. And let me tell you that I have taught a lot of workshops on this topic for years. And I like to joke that, and we're going to get into this a little bit, but for whatever reason, most people consider feedback the other F word. And so there's something about that word feedback that immediately gets people tense and so on. And so we're doing 2 episodes on this, but this first one is about receiving it and receiving it productively. And that could be because you've actually asked for it, you've been proactive, or it can be just reactive. Someone has given it to you, even if you didn't ask for it. And I have a few stories of that where it benefited me immensely, even though in the moment it was a lot.
I got to ask you, like, why is it so crazy that when it comes to getting feedback at work, we get like, or let's even extend that. Even at home, like when your significant other or your friend says, I have some feedback for you. Like, cause it's not like we're not used to feedback, right?
Well, it depends. I mean, here's what I do know, and I think this is such an interesting phenomenon that many of us, when we were growing up and possibly even in college and possibly further, did what is often referred to as something extracurricular, right? And that may be a sport or some kind of performance oriented thing. For instance, I rode horses growing up and I competed. So I had a coach. I also was in the high school dance company.
Did not know that was
I sure was. Modern dance, we were called the moving company.
oh God. I need a step ball change next time I see you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you should have just known that from the
I did.
way I've cut it on the dance floor over the years. But even if you didn't do sports, many folks, if you engage in anything artistic, so it could be like I have a friend who's a painter for real, like paints for a living and majored in art and illustration in college, went on to get a fellowship. And I also have done a lot of creative writing, including going to workshops where you share your writing. And in both of those scenarios, whether it's athletics or artistic, it's just a given that you're going to get feedback on what works well or what you did well, and also what could have been better or just what didn't work. And it's just very much part of the deal. And even if it can feel a little painful to talk about the what didn't go well, you don't question whether it should be happening. You just know that that's part of the process. And yet we go to work and suddenly that comfort just seems to disappear. Like no, the idea that we're going to talk about what could have gone better or how I could have improved or how I could grow is suddenly this incredibly tense thing. So I don't know why that disconnect happens, but I mean, it certainly happened to me. I mean, I think if we wanted to, we could pick it apart. But I think the challenge for all of us is how can we be artists and athletes in the workplace?
I love that. And think about let's talk about the why and the power of it. How do you improve without it? I would argue you have a very warped sense of self often. I don't care who you are. Like you can be as objective as you want to be, but you're not going to always be cognizant of how you approach something in a meeting or how your presentation missed the mark because your lens on the content is just completely different. You're intimate with them and they're not. So maybe it was too intimate and you didn't raise the points up and escalate the points well enough, or maybe you engaged a conversation and you could have approached the topic from a more productive perspective.
And
So
we all have blind spots, and we also all have our like unconscious routines, right? Like we don't even kind of know what we're I talk with my hands, but I'm not aware that I'm talking with my hands. You know what I mean? And so there are these things we do that we're not even aware of. And one of the ways we can become self-aware is people letting us know how we're impacting other people or how we impacted the performance of X or Y. The other thing, Rose, is the way you improve without it is by stumbling around and making so many mistakes. And it's an unproductive way to grow, right?
it
Sometimes,
decelerates progression.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
this
exactly.
you stumble and you decelerate versus get feedback and accelerate.
I mean, we all, no matter what we do, have to figure a little bit out on our own, right? And we have to make our mistakes and so on. But the idea of, how do we ever get better? I mean, it's a long and painful process if we're not seeking out ways for people to help us get better, you know?
Yeah, and just as a quick spontaneous role play, Dana, like if you were the manager and you provided me feedback. Let's pick a point. I don't even care what it is. Pick a point.
On your effectiveness as a podcast host.
Yeah, okay. So my effectiveness as a podcast host. And one of the feedback items was, like if I got the link to Riverside earlier, I would be able to get my setup ready and we could hit the ground running at top of the hour versus 5 minutes in. By the way, that's a real time example. Like that literally happened 15 minutes ago. And it's not that I didn't provide it. I didn't provide it in the right calendar appointment. So having said that, like, how can I take that? How can I receive that? I could be angry and go, what a pain in the ass. Like, look at the right appointment. And it was right there. Or I could go, okay, thanks for that feedback. Here's the approach that I want to take moving forward. And when I do that, please tell me if I missed the mark. Real time, like just a simple real time example, right? And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
what's that illustrate? It illustrates a couple things. It illustrates your intent to improve, also known as and you'll hear managers say, are they coachable? Are they coachable?
Oh, that's interesting. For instance, and I think I know what you're saying here, is like if you're thinking of, Intel was a large organization, so you could have people transferring in that had already worked at the company.
Yep.
And that might be a question you ask sort of mano a mano with who they worked with before. Like, is this person coachable?
Yeah.
And what you mean by that is, can they receive feedback and not like freak out and dismiss it?
And when you get the feedback, can you action it? Meaning you can illustrate how to take that feedback. So you're going to give me you're giving me my review, Dana, on my podcasting skills. And I am doing a couple things. I am grabbing a pen and I am writing it down. I'm then coming back to you in a subsequent meeting, having internalized it with an action plan. And then in that action plan, am going to say, if I meet these deliverables and we review my progress and I illustrate comprehension of this feedback, will I meet your objectives? What does that prove? I can listen, I'm coachable, I'm action oriented, and I follow through.
Yeah. By the way, Rose, it's so funny. You've just described what every manager who has to deliver feedback hopes is going to happen.
Right.
Now, we know that that doesn't always happen. But from the receiving point of view, I think, first of all, what you just said is the ideal. And it does show, in a nutshell, what that shows is maturity, right? Is that, and that you genuinely want to improve. And I think that the biggest thing about receiving feedback is just how do we manage our reactions to it?
That's great.
Because it is human nature to get defensive, right? And so first of all, I'm talking about feedback that is delivered respectfully. I mean, feedback like, could you have been more of an idiot in that meeting? Like, that's not feedback. That's just being disrespectful and insulting, right? So I want to be clear. But even when we get respectful feedback, it is human nature to want to shut that down or deflect it or shove it off. And I'll give you an example. I'll give you two examples. I was in my late 20s and I had started a role that was frankly, like, I realize now I was probably underqualified for it. They hired me like taking a big chance. Let's put it that way. And my peer group were all like 20 years older than I was. Like, I was in my late 20s and everybody was in their 40s and 50s. I still don't even know why they hired me. I was director of learning and development. And so this was my peer group, right? And this one man in particular really wanted me to succeed. And I didn't work for him and I didn't interact with him a ton, but we would just have coffee once in a while. And I had a challenge and I was talking it through with him. And I was like, I'd really like to get your ideas. And then I shared it. And he said, okay, I have some thoughts for you, but first I just want to share something. You would be a lot more effective if you could make your points in half the words. And I was caught by, I was like,
so this is an example of feedback that you did not ask for.
Right. I did not ask for that. But I will tell you that that was one of the biggest favors anyone has ever done for me in my entire life, is he was right. And what you have to do is manage your reaction, and you have to figure out how you can take that breath and not go with the knee-jerk, utterly human reaction, which is to kind of deflect it or maybe just yes it, but not really take it seriously, And I will say one of the reasons was that it was direct and it was firm, but it wasn't asshole, like he wasn't being a jerk. He wasn't like, Dana, could you just make your points? And he was really saying it with care, but it was direct. And then I also got that in a performance review once. Again, I didn't ask. Well, I mean, you're going to be getting feedback in a performance review. So I guess I could say I was mentally prepared. But yeah, the feedback was that company did 360. So your manager heard from the people that you worked with. And she was like, the general theme is you need to find a half speed. You need to know how to slow down when the circumstances require it. And again, it caught me off guard, but it was doing me a huge favor. But it was all about managing my reaction to it. And I don't mean not acknowledging emotion. We've got to acknowledge our emotions, but not let the emotions drive the bus. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and I have a little bit of a story of some recent coaching I did where the person asked for the feedback. It was similarly, and we would encourage you to not, if you're a manager, I know we're talking about receiving feedback now, but if you're a manager, don't do feedback on only the annual cycle, performance review cycle. So just we'll talk about that again in the next episode. But in this example, this individual was hoping for a promotion and didn't get it. So then the next conversation was that I encouraged as the person coaching them was go back in prepared and say, what do I need to do to meet your expectations such that I'm ready for that promotion in the next cycle? So it was a young employee, right? So they're not used to asking for insight, et cetera, or asking for feedback. So there was a little anxiety. So for those of you that are young in career, having that conversation isn't always an easy one. So,
Well,
but
and honestly, Rose, at 45, I would still be like nervous about it. I'd still be like, oh shit, here I go.
yeah, but you go in, you're prepared, and you go, and I'm going to say this a few times in this episode. You take your pen and your notebook
Mhm.
and you take copious notes around the things that the manager wanted to see. And this is what I encourage. Write
Mhm.
down what they want to see. You go
Mhm.
back, you internalize that. And then you come back with your action plan that says, you said I needed to be more strategic. This is what my lens of being more strategic is, and my deliverable that's going to demonstrate that. Are we aligned? The
Yeah.
alignment in part of the feedback process and how you're actioning the feedback is super, super clear because you don't want to go off and do a bunch of work that you think meets their expectations. And then you go back and it doesn't. So you capture it, you action it, you align it, and then you follow up and you say, look what I've completed, agreed to in our plan. And in this example, it was a promotion. So I'll circle back to that. Am I ready and have I completed the necessary steps that enable you to fight for me to receive that promotion?
Right.
It was great. And by the way, they got the promo.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
And so you've highlighted such a frustrating thing sometimes about receiving feedback, which is that it's not specific enough.
Yeah.
And it's not that the person delivering it, you and I have both been managers, we've had to deliver it. It's just sometimes, again, you mentioned this already, we're so inside of it that we sometimes don't realize we're not being clear. We
Yep.
think it's obvious. We think it's obvious, right? And so your point about asking for examples. So when I hear be more strategic, what I'm thinking is I need to do X, Y, and Z, and asking them, am I getting that right?
Yeah.
That pull whatever you need to do to pull out the specifics. So to your point, you two aren't now on just parallel tracks that have nothing to do with each other. Like,
Absolutely.
I'm doing what I think is strategic, and yet the person who gave you the feedback is thinking about something totally different. And it's a very common thing that feedback is not specific enough. And
Yes.
and then you sort of are setting things up
And we'll
for a lot
talk
of
about that
frustration.
in the next episode when we talk about giving feedback. But
Yeah, but you really have to pull for it. Like, we're going to talk in the next episode about how to be specific. But that said, so many of us receive it and it's not. So you've really got to figure out, can you give me an example? Or, okay, so if I did this, like whatever you can do to get it to that specific level.
you own your employability and your progression at the
Mhm.
end of the day. So with that, Dana, let's wrap it up. Give me a hot take and a call to action.
All right, hot take, hot take. We've all got to be artists and athletes. We've
Mhm.
all got to get comfortable with the idea that receiving input on what you could have done better or how you can grow is a good thing and it's a natural thing. I will also highlight that there are certain organizations that have built this culture where every single person, top to bottom, knows that regularly, to your point, not once a year, regularly, we're going to talk about what's going well and what could be improved. And so think about that. That's your call to action is how do you, even if you don't have a company culture to build, even if you just have a direct team, how do you build that culture in your team? And just get started with it and voice it proactively. Be like, I want to start this. Let's give it a try for 6 months and see how it's going. But I want us all to start talking about what's going well and also how we can be improving one-on-one and as a team.
My hot take is feedback is a gift, but you actually have to use the gift. So
Right. You have
write
to
it
be
down,
open to the gift.
action it, follow up, and close. And with
Yes.
that is episode 2, season 3. Thank you all for listening. Subscribe, follow, and we'll catch you next week talking about giving feedback.
Giving that feedback.
Thank you all. Have a great week.